Good idea.
I got it.
We want Scott
I got it.
focus on us.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Thank you.
Star Wars.
you can put the Reds or the Guardians games on, and I can handle one.
That'd be good.
Phillies at 9:30.
Chelsea 9:30,
They're announcing.
yeah.
Did anybody hear
So,
back from
believe it or
Roger?
not, I'm more than the Reds do.
Who's got it?
So I'm a diehard Phillies fan this week.
This week,
This week, yeah.
my dad took me to my first Phillies game. I was asleep.
Oh, wow.
It says orientation is locked, rotate device back. Do you have like something locked on your settings?
For me, growing up in Southern Ohio, it's the same thing with Crosby Field.
How do you pull up your
It's the only time I ever saw one
Like that.
in my life.
rotation is locked?
Gotta step this way.
Yeah, it's locked.
Gotta step this way.
Yeah, I don't
That's
know what.
fine.
Okay, yeah, we'll
Yeah,
do
that's
that.
cool.
Yeah, do with that really high leg kick.
Is it live now?
Yeah.
Wow, okay, so this is all live.
So watch what you say, boys.
Over to you, Scott.
Are we ready?
Yeah, well.
Okay, so again, I want to thank everybody for your time tonight. For those who don't know me, my name is Scott Mingus. I live in York, PA. Written 36 Civil War books and about a dozen wargaming books or so. But tonight I want to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, and that's the Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore Railroad. So if we look here, what becomes the PWB actually are four separate individual railroads. Each of these four railroads originally had a different gauge. So every time you stopped where that railroad ended, you had to get off your train, transfer everything to a new train at the passenger station on the wider or narrower tracks. They would take you down to the next railroad, and then again, four separate railroads, 1831, 32, 32. All four of these railroads were not financially successful. Most of them had severe financial limitations. And one point, when the first two of these went belly up, then the Maryland State Legislature basically said, look, why don't the other two companies combine, buy the charters, and we're going to reconstitute this as one single railroad. And so that is how the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore would originally get its start, is on the backbones of these four different railroads. But one of the key things I want to point out is right here. This is the Susquehanna River. I live right there. So here's the Susquehanna River coming down through here, and one of the problems is you got to stop here. And we'll talk about why in a couple minutes. So this guy down here, his name is Samuel Morse Felton. Oh, here we go. Hi.
Thank you, sir. My apologies.
Hey, no problem. We're just getting started. So, early history. Samuel Morse Felton is the guy who puts the railroads together. He's the guy that is chartered by Pennsylvania and by Maryland to put these things into one piece, and he's going to start almost immediately changing the gauges so that all four of these railroads have the same gauge. Huge task. And in the 1840s, that was a big thing in northern railroads, was to start to put, as you guys know, starting to put the gauges closer together so the railroads would interconnect. It didn't always happen in the South, which is a whole other talk I give on southern railroads. But this is the covered bridge over the Schuylkill River. This marker still exists. It's along the bike path in southwestern Philadelphia. It marks where the unofficial beginning of the PWB was, which right outside of that bridge. So that's kind of the monument to Samuel Morse Felton, giving him credit for starting the PWB. As you see up there, you can see mail lines to Baltimore, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore Railroad. That's the very first ad I can find. Look at that locomotive. God bless us one and all. I mean, from what I understand, that thing could probably rip along at 15 miles an hour. You know, maybe on a good day 20, but usually about 15 miles an hour. So the PWB, obviously here, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Wilmington there, is the backbone of, during the Civil War, the New York City to Washington route. So the PWB, just like today with Amtrak route between New York and Washington, this corridor is still the Amtrak Northeast Corridor, a part of it. But if you look here, again, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, down through here, again, another real early ad for the railroad advertising the fact the service between the nation's largest city and the nation's capital.
What year is that ad?
This ad is from, throughout from New York to Washington in I think it's 1855 if I remember. I don't know, I've got it in my notes, which are back home. So I give you an idea of what it probably would have looked like at that point. So let's look at a few of their buildings, just to give an idea. This is what they called the Southern and Western Station. That was the official name of it. It's in Philadelphia. It's now a parking lot filled with weeds. But at one time, this was a pretty impressive train station. Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore. This is off Broad Street and Prime Street, then known as Washington Avenue. So this is roughly in the general neighborhood of the Philadelphia sports complexes. So if you know where the Spectrum was, or and the hockey stadium is today, and the Franklin, whatever, what do they call it? Eagles call it Lincoln Life Field, whatever it's called. Yeah, it's that general area. It's the southwest side of Philly. So here's Wilmington Station, not nearly as grand. Wilmington Station was basically a hotel. They didn't build a station. They used a existing facility in here in Wilmington. And so the railroad took over the facility, at least one corner of it, to use as a ticket office. They had a waiting room for men, a separate waiting room for women, and that's pretty much it. That's all they had here at Wilmington for the station. They did have an engine house, so here's the engine house at Wilmington, and then there's the roundhouse.
Quite the roof.
Yeah, look at it. I love the pitch on that thing. I mean, you don't have to worry about water draining off of that.
Or snow.
No, not a problem, yeah, so. And this is, back to my point earlier, my co-author, Robert Williams, this is one of the documents he found in the Pennsylvania Railroad's files. That is the Civil War layout of what the station, feel free to take pictures, whatever you want.
Oh,
That's what it would look like. Yeah, that's
Oh,
fine.
that's neat.
Is that
Yeah,
your
isn't
book?
that cool? So, you know, we just saw those two buildings. Of course, there's your conical, you know, there's of course the engine house over there. There's the front street, and here is Front Street. There's your river. And again, that's what the layout would have looked like as of 1857. So there's
So
the date
what-
on that one.
That little slip of water that goes up, is that for boats or cargo, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, that was actually, this was a warehouse on the back end of here. And so you could actually bring stuff up by boat,
Yeah.
load it into the box cars in the shed,
Wow.
and so you could deliver it directly. So without, so if you never, if everybody ever wants to make a model of that, you know, that's pretty cool. And so we've got all the other track plans. So if anyone's ever interested in the rest of this railroad, we didn't put it in the book, but we have all the track plans.
What? Is that,
I love those.
is that in the book?
That's in the book.
That's what.
That one's in the book. So this is Baltimore, President Street Station, of course, down here. And that's what the head would look like, of course. This today, have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the Baltimore Civil War Museum, for those who haven't been there.
They have a Civil War museum.
Yeah, it's the Baltimore Civil War Museum.
They have photos of the
I think I've been in there.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah, they do, they do.
Probably should go there sometime.
Yeah, if you haven't been there, you should. It's free. I mean, it's a nice, it's not a big museum, but it's free, and, you know, they preserve the head house really nice, so.
We went there in the 2012.
Okay. Yeah. So, let's focus for a minute on this, the Susquehanna River. You know, I live, of course, in York County, which is on the west side of the Susquehanna River. Susquehanna River is the longest river in the east, draining into the Atlantic. It's also the longest river in the entire country that's never had commercial shipping. Because in the old days, the Susquehanna River was too narrow, too fast, too rocky, and too shallow in many places for commercial boats. About the only thing you ever could do commercially on this was float rafts and logs down the Susquehanna River.
Yeah.
They didn't have paddle boats and steamboats, you know, traffic like the Ohio River, the Missouri, Cumberland, Tennessee, whatever.
It's really
Not this
rocky.
river.
It's really-
No canal alongside it?
Yeah, there were canals. In fact,
I'm looking
Not,
at this
you
picture.
can't see it, this picture is way up by New York, this is right at the border.
I'm
In fact,
looking at
that is
this.
New York right there.
In thinking that, that's not the Susquehanna that I know until it's
Yeah,
pretty south.
yeah, this is the Susquehanna, like I said, that's New York, this is extreme northern Pennsylvania. So, but the reason I bring this up is this is a barrier. In the way early days of Pennsylvania, William Penn's original charter stopped at the river. And so the Indians had the west side of the river, if you will, and then eventually the white people started moving across the river, and Penn's second charter gave him pretty much to Ohio, which the Indians didn't like. But that river was the original border of Pennsylvania. Penn's woods stopped where the river came down way back when. So the problem is having a grace. Remember I showed you earlier the railroad's coming down? Susquehanna River did not have a bridge. I came across the I-95 bridge today, paid my $6 with my Easy Pass, but the only way you could really cross the river in the early days was by boat. And so the PW&B builds this thing. It's called the Maryland. Anybody ever seen this picture before?
I have.
Yeah, so this is the Maryland. So they would actually have railroad tracks on the ferry. They would
Damn.
put it up to the dock. The train would roll onto it. You can see, you know, there's like 7 cars. The very first one, this is the second Maryland. The first Maryland only held 2 cars. So then they had this bigger, longer, bigger boat. And so again, you know, train rolls up, goes on the boat goes across the river between Perryville and Havre de Grace, and then comes out on the other side and unloads. Believe it or not, the Maryland years later is actually sold to a New York company and ends up doing the same duty on the Hudson River. And then eventually it's scrapped. But it is used in New York until late 1800s.
That'd be a great staging track
Yeah, wouldn't it be?
on the boat. Oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah. So that's bottleneck number 1. The other bottleneck the PWB has is the same that the other railroads do in Baltimore, and that's the fact that Baltimore City Council did not allow locomotives in town. So you can never have a locomotive in under power within Baltimore city limits. So we're going to put the Northern Central Railway here up to Harrisburg. We're going to put the President Street Station right here, leading to Wilmington and Philadelphia. And here's the Baltimore and Ohio station, now clear down here where the B&O Museum is today. And that is, of course, Camden Yards. So right there's Camden Yards. And right there is the Orioles baseball stadium.
So President Station is over by Canton.
What's that?
It's by Canton.
Yeah, PW President Street Station is in Canton. Canton, Fells Point area.
Yeah, I've never known that. I'll
Yeah,
have to check that out.
yeah, yeah, it's right there, still there, right at the end. Well, again, because you cannot run locomotives in town, the stations, of course, are out of town, and what connects them are trolley lines. So the Inner Harbor, in particular, down Pratt Street, you would have trolley lines, and so you would put the railroad cars onto the trolley line, hook them up to mules or to oxen or to draft horses, and pull your railroad cars that were transferring between railroads, between the stations. So at Baltimore, and we're going to come back to this, it's going to play a huge role in the Civil War. But I want you to keep this in mind. So again, Northern Central Railway, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore and Ohio.
Right.
Those are the 3 train stations at the time of the Civil War in Baltimore. And of course,
What about the
this is the
Western
Inner
Maryland?
Harbor right here.
Did the Western Maryland not go to Baltimore then?
No, I got another book out here, the Western Maryland. So this is Northern Central, right? Comes all the way up here to Harrisburg, okay? Right about here is York. Right about there where the C is called a little place called Relay House, Northern Central. At Relay House, the Western Maryland come off of the Relay House. So it never ran into Baltimore during the Civil War years. It came down, hit the Northern Central, paid rent to the Northern Central for the ability to come down to Calvert Street Station. So Western Maryland at the time of the Civil War only ran to Union Bridge. So just west of Westminster in New Windsor, if you're familiar with that part of Maryland, Carroll County. But yeah, Relay House, I got to talk in the Northern Central and show you a picture of Relay House. Anybody familiar with Baltimore?
Oh, yeah.
There's a place called Lake Roland. You know where Lake Roland is? That's Relay House. So the railroad branched off at the lake, which was there during the war. It was a reservoir even then. All right, so keep this thing in mind. This is really important as we go forward in the Civil War. The fact that Baltimore's got this bottleneck sitting there. All right, so this is, as far as we can tell, one of the very first locomotives used at the time of the Civil War. This is a time built in 1860, say PW&D Railroad. So Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore. This is locomotive number 20, which I can't remember the name is off the top of my head. Again, this is from the files of the PW&D, which designated the railroad throughout my friend Brad. So kind of cool because I think we're the only people that have used this picture.
Interesting stack on it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Diamond box.
Yeah,
Is that
diamond blocks, and also look how thin the stack is
The
too.
little sunflowers.
I thought those would only be for coal burning, because the wood needs more,
Maybe they were over.
because that could have been coal.
It might have
They
been
were
coal.
doing
They had
that.
coal
There
burners
were
at the start of the
lots
war.
different
Yeah,
solutions to
they had
that.
some coal burners.
The
Yeah.
Northern Central had a lot of coal burners,
They
because
did.
they mined a lot of coal.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, because the Northern Central had a big coal house at, you know,
You don't see a single log sticking its head up. either.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the other thing back here, yeah. So, as we're probably familiar with,
Yeah.
before the war, Samuel Morse Felton has a problem in Baltimore with counterfeiting. There are people down here in Maryland that were counterfeiting tickets at the train station, of course. And so Samuel Morse Felton heard about a similar issue in Chicago. So he contacted the president of the Illinois Central Railroad. Anybody know that guy's name? His name is George Brenton McClellan.
Ah, it was good.
He contacts George
right.
McClellan, who puts him in contact with the Illinois Central's attorney. Another guy you might have heard of, Abraham Lincoln. So Lincoln and McClellan are talking to Samuel Morse Felton about this counterfeiting issue. And what Felton learns from Lincoln is that Lincoln had hired a detective in Chicago by the name of Allen Pinkerton to work on solving the counterfeiting issue. Pinkerton and his detective agency out of Chicago had found the counterfeiters and had broken up the ring. And so Samuel Morse Felton figures, I got the same problem down in Baltimore. So he hires at his expense, he hires Pinkerton. Pinkerton shows up in Philadelphia, meets with Samuel Morse Felton, tells him, okay, I'll send out some teams. We'll find out what's going on down in Baltimore. He sends teams out, Timothy Webster, Kate Warren, one of the first female detectives in U.S. history, 4 other detectives. There are 6 men that Pinkerton brings with him, or sends for, and brings down to Baltimore. And they start lining the tracks looking for counterfeiters. They don't find the counterfeiters. What they do supposedly find, and they tell back to Samuel Morse Felton, is there's a plot to kill Abraham Lincoln. When your train arrives at the President Street station and it's going to transfer to the train station at Baltimore, you're going to get killed. Then they hear later the plans have changed. They're not going to kill him on the PWB because publicly now Lincoln has changed his agenda and he's going to come into Baltimore from the north, from Harrisburg, on the Northern Central Railway. And so these spies, particularly Timothy Webster, Tim Webster is one of my heroes. He's actually executed by the Confederate Army later in the war for when he's caught spying on the Confederate Army. But for this point, while he's still got his neck intact, Tim Webster is the one who's really driving the story. That there's a Cypriot barber at the Barnum Hotel in downtown Baltimore who, with his cohorts, are going to stab Lincoln to death when he gets out of the Northern Central's train station and starts going towards the Inner Harbor, of course, to transfer to the B&O at Camden Yards. And so Lincoln isn't aware of that. He's still on his train way back up in the north on his way, but Pinkerton is convinced. And here at Perrymansville, in this is the train station, the PWB station here, this is where Tim Webster bribes a bunch of Delaware boys and starts learning more and more about this plot, which is supposedly centered in Baltimore, but also concerns a number of young men from Harford County, Maryland. Now, one of my good friends has been working on this story for about 20 years. Somewhere downstream, he's going to write a book. Maybe I'll co-author it, I don't know yet. But he's got a list of some of the pro-Confederate sympathizers of Harford County, Maryland, particularly Bel Air, Maryland. And according to my friend, on this list, all he has is the initials of these people who supposedly are conspirators. In Bel Air, there's one man whose initials are JWB. John Wilkes Booth lived in Bel Air, Maryland, was born there. And so he was educated in York, PA for a while. But is Booth part of the plot in 1861? Doubt it, but you never know. My friend swears he was. I don't know. I don't have enough proof yet. I'm a scientist. I need to see the data. And I don't have enough data yet. So I don't have enough data. I don't really think Booth would have been involved in it. Because he's an actor, he's really famous at that point, and he's probably not that often in Harford County. But you never know. There are other people with that initials in the county as well. So Lincoln assassination plot, as we know. And so what they decided to do is Lincoln's train is due to leave Harrisburg. He's going to make a speech the night before in Harrisburg at the Jones House Hotel. Governor Curtin of Pennsylvania will be there. Big shindig, and then he'll get a night's rest, and in the morning he's going to take the southbound Northern Central train from Harrisburg down to York, where I live. In York, almost all trains then had to stop for wood and water, and so they would refuel the train in York. Lincoln was supposed to get off, wave to the people, make a quick little speech, and then the train would continue on to Baltimore. That's what everyone's worried about. So after Lincoln makes his speech in downtown Harrisburg, he goes up to his room. That makes sure a valet sees him enter his room, etc. When the valet leaves, then they sneak Lincoln out of the hotel. He goes down a back alleyway out there into a waiting carriage. He is whisked to a Pennsylvania Railroad train that's sitting not at the train station, it's sitting at a siding on the east side of Harrisburg. Lincoln jumps on that. He rides down to Philadelphia to catch the PWB when he gets down there. So these drawings these actual drawings are by Alan Pinkerton. Pinkerton wrote an article that appeared in a detective magazine after the war, and I found the thing, and I found his actual drawings. So here's again, this is Pinkerton himself. There's Ed, etc. But so they get to Philadelphia, and there's a subterfuge going on because the PWB's regular midnight train is delayed, and they say, look, we don't want your train to leave because we got important dispatches from the government, and you can't leave until these dispatches are delivered. So they tell the conductor that hold the train until the dispatches arrive. In the meantime, they take a bunch of old railroad documents, they seal them, make them look good, put a ribbon around it, put a wax, put the seal of the governor of Pennsylvania on it, and then they deliver that with Lincoln on the train. So when they arrive in downtown Philadelphia, the Ward Hill Layman, who's Lincoln's bodyguard, gets off with the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, J. Edgar Thompson, and they will deliver the packet to the conductor. At the same time, a carriage arrives in the back, and here comes Abraham Lincoln. He's in disguise. He's with his sickly, I can't recall if she tells him that the people on board the train, if she's his sister or his daughter. I don't remember that little fact. But Kate Warren, the female spy, is already on the train. So she has reserved a booth for her brother. I'm pretty sure it's her brother, who's Lincoln, of course. And so Lincoln gets on the train. Kate Warren already has a room for him. He goes into that room, and Lincoln will stay on board the train as it's heading down. So the problem for Lincoln, though, is this Lincoln's been on the PWD multiple times. When he is a United States congressman before the war in the early 1850s, he has taken the train to New York City at least 4 times that I know of. And every time he's had to stop at Perryville or at southbound or northbound at Havre de Grace, get off the train, and then ride the Maryland. And Lincoln liked riding the Maryland. And the problem they have now, he's president-elect of the United States, he wants to go on board the Maryland. You know, when they get there, he wants to get off the train. Ward Hill Layman and Alan Pinkerton are almost having a conniption fit. You can't get up and walk around with the other passengers. Somebody might recognize you. Now, this is long before CNN and all these other news medias. I mean, Lord knows if anybody would have known what Abraham Lincoln even looked like at that point in time, but they might have figured, oh, he's unusually tall, might be him. Certainly speaks like a Midwesterner, not like an Easterner, maybe. So they keep Lincoln on board. Once the hour-long passage across the Susquehanna on this slow-moving Maryland takes place, they get back on the train, and they have teams of Pinkerton spies are lining the tracks with railroad lanterns. And they will give signals if it's all clear, or if the train needs to stop. Luckily, it's all clear. And so, because they're still worried about sabotage, somewhere along the PWB, could there be somebody taking out a bridge or something? No, no problem. So Lincoln's going to arrive at President Street Station. The problem is, by the time he rolls into President Street Station, there's no southbound train at Camden Yards. So he is whisked in a carriage in the middle of the night to Camden Yards. He sits in the carriage until 6 o'clock in the morning, and then his carriage will leave for Washington, D.C. That same morning, Lincoln did not show up in Harrisburg for breakfast with the governor. And some of the reporters are like, well, this is a little strange, and they're told Lincoln's under the weather. So the southbound Northern Central Railway train leaves Harrisburg with Mrs. Lincoln, with William Wallace Lincoln and Tad Lincoln and Robert Lincoln on board, the 3 kids. They arrive in York, and according to my local newspapers, everybody's 4,000 people standing there to get a look at Lincoln. No Lincoln. Mary waves, but no Lincoln. And everyone's like, what the heck's going on? And then they figure out, somebody sends a telegram, oh yeah, Mr. Lincoln is at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. He's already safe. So the Northern Central train, with Mrs. Lincoln on board, heads down to Baltimore, but it doesn't go to Baltimore City right away. It stops about 5 miles north of Baltimore, where a United States congressman from Maryland has his carriage waiting, and Mrs. Lincoln and the boys get off the train north of Baltimore, and they're whisked into the safety of this U.S. congressman's house, and then the train arrives at President Street or Calvert Street Station, and if Lincoln's going to get assassinated, well, there's too bad. Nobody there for him to kill. So that's the guts of the story. The question still is it real? It's been debated for 160 years. Was there really a plot to kill Abraham Lincoln? Now, of course, Alan Pinkerton stands by his detectives for the rest of his life. Ward Hill Layman and Lincoln tend to poo-poo the thing, and Lincoln particularly downplays the whole thing and says, you know, I don't think anyone was trying to kill me at all. And as the Civil War goes on, Lincoln becomes more and more convinced there never was a plot in Baltimore. I know prominent historians in Baltimore on both sides of the fence. Absolutely there was a plot, absolutely there was not a plot.
Wow.
I mean, to this day, guys will find their own evidence that there was or there wasn't. So I just, being a scientist, I present the facts and I'll let people worry, you know, did it happen or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I love this, we've all seen this, right?
Yep.
PWD Railroad, there it is, going to Baltimore. And there's Scaredy Cat Lincoln, you know, in this Scotch tan hat and his Union Army overcoat, you know.
Yeah, it works out well.
So, anyway.
So CNN started back then is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. That's the Anderson Cooper's drawing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So, of course, the war begins in April of 1861. Lincoln's been in office all of the 3 weeks or so. and now the war begins. The problem, let's go back to our comment about the bottleneck of Baltimore. If you're going to start hot rushing troops to Washington, now, I lived 23 years outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Those of us who are from or lived in the Cleveland area are familiar with a section of Cleveland called Reserve Square. It's surrounded by a lot of really beautiful white marble buildings, limestone buildings, etc. Looks a little bit like Washington, D.C. It's a pretty cool area of Cleveland. Now, a lot of federal buildings still there, nightclubs, etc. But if you're not from Cleveland, you don't know this fact. In 1856, when John Fremont is running against James Buchanan for President of the United States, the U.S. government is worried that at some point there will be a war. And Maryland is what? A slave state. What's Virginia? A slave state. If Maryland and Virginia both go with a South in the event of a potential secession, what's Washington, D.C. surrounded by? Confederates.
Rebels.
So, did you know, the U.S. government in 1856 started building Federal Reserve Square in Cleveland. That's why the first Federal Reserve Bank is in Cleveland. It is for the United States government. If they evacuate Washington, D.C., Cleveland, Ohio becomes the new capital of the United States. And still, I'm told, that is still part of still in the books of the government, that they will still evacuate part of the people to Cleveland. Other people will go off. They're not going to put them all in one location now, they'll just scatter people out. But they still have offices in Cleveland still reserved today, if they ever need to do that. So, with all that, they want to start bringing United States troops through Baltimore down to Washington, because you got to keep Maryland from seceding, correct? You cannot cut off Maryland. It's got to stay in the Union, or else you have to go to Plan B and start activating Cleveland. So, the first defenders arrived in Baltimore from Skokie County, Pennsylvania, and Berks County, Pennsylvania. They arrived on April 17th, April 16th, I mean. They wound up being in fistfights. There's a black man who's accompanying this 2nd Pennsylvania Infantry, and he's hit in the head with a brick. He becomes the first man in the Civil War to be outside of the two guys who blow up at Fort Sumter when their cannon blows up as they're surrendering. He becomes the first person in the Civil War to be hit by an enemy projectile. It's a black man from Reading, Pennsylvania, smacked in the head with a brick. He's bleeding. The Pennsylvanians make it through. They march down through Inner Harbor. They get to their train at Camden Yards, and off they go to Washington. Well, the people of Maryland are like, that's not going to happen tomorrow. There's more people coming tomorrow from Massachusetts. And so when the Massachusetts train arrives at the PWB station, the Marylanders are ready. This time, it's not going to be brickbats being thrown. They got pistols, they got guns, they got rocks, they got all kinds of stuff. And what goes down in history is the Pratt Street Riot, or as people in Maryland say, the Pratt Street Resistance. But as we know, there's the fight that goes on in downtown Baltimore. And here's, again, the drugs. This is President Street Station down in Canton. There is the railroad tracks, trolley line running through the Inner Harbor, then known as the Basin. So this is the route that the Maryland Infantry, or Massachusetts Infantry has to take. And right about the corner here, they get blasted. First shots fire. There's all kinds of fighting that go on right about here. By the way, this is the Hard Rock Hotel. So to familiarize, when you're at Baltimore, if you're ever at the Hard Rock, right across the street is where most of the Massachusetts boys get shot. That's the worst of the fighting. The Pratt Street Riot happens right there at the Hard Rock. And so, you know, on this side, of course, is Ripley's Believer Night, etc. There's Pratt Street, here's Camden Yards, right here, Camden Station. This, of course, is what? Utah Street.
Baseball.
Yeah, this is the baseball stadium is right there. Yeah, so that gives you an idea of what this area would look. Trolley line that went up to the Howard Street went up to the Northern Central, and this trolley line, of course, goes there. So they connected all three of these railroads using this trolley line, so you could at least bring freight through Baltimore as long as you weren't bringing locomotives. But it's that Baltimore City rule that says you cannot have locomotives under power is what causes the Pratt Street Riot. Otherwise, your train just blows through Baltimore. Well, you can't do that, and everybody knows that. So first, that bottleneck creates maybe a problem for Abraham Lincoln, definitely creates a problem for the 2nd Pennsylvania, and in spades creates a problem in fatalities for the Massachusetts boys as they're coming down. So the U.S. government responds to this in spades. Well, while this is going on, this guy, Isaac Trimble, goes to the governor of Maryland. Now, Isaac Trimble, before the war, lived in York, Pennsylvania. He was the guy who laid out the Baltimore and Susquehanna's line. Baltimore and Susquehanna, much like the PWB, was one of 4 railroads that went bankrupt in Pennsylvania, and they merged to become the Northern Central Railway. So both the PWB and the Northern Central were 4 separate railroads, 8 separate railroads, if you add them up, before the war. So this guy's really familiar with York. His house where he lived in York is gone, but he's a Virginian, West Point grad. Again, he's been building stuff. Believe it or not, the Baltimore and Susquehanna / Northern Central has fired this guy. Why? Isaac Trimble is accused of, some things haven't changed, selling railroad property and pocketing the money himself. It seems like he's been somehow or another miscounting the number of ties that are necessary to create the trackage from Baltimore to Harrisburg, and about double the ties are ordered versus what are installed. And what happened to the rest of that lumber? He gets the money. Samuel Morse Felton calls, the president of the PWB, calls him into his office because he's pulling the same stunt on the PWB. They got fired on the Baltimore and Susquehanna, and Samuel Morse Felton has fired Isaac Trimble. Trimble goes back to Baltimore. He is out of the railroad business. He takes over the Maryland State Militia. He is a brigadier general of Maryland State Militia. He goes to the governor and says, you know, we got these Massachusetts boys, and the day before the Pennsylvania boys. I don't think we should do this. I think we need to destroy the railroad. I think, you know, this is a Pennsylvania chartered railroad now. PWB with Philadelphia Railroad by this point. And we don't want this to happen. So he's like, all right, talk to the mayor. So Trimble talks to the mayor of Baltimore. He gets 50 Maryland cops. He gets a bunch of his own soldiers, and they are going to create havoc. So here's Baltimore. This is the PWD running right through here, okay? There's the Susquehanna, that's Perryville, that's Havre de Grace, this is Delaware. This is what's called the next region of Maryland. Look at all those inlets, right? And the railroad has bridges over every one of them. So what Isaac Trimble tells the governor of Maryland is, I'm going to take a train, I'm going to steal a PWB train, I'm going to run north, I'm going to burn the Maryland, remember our ferry?
Yeah.
I'm going to burn the Maryland, I'm going to destroy those 4 bridges. Do I have your permission to do it? Now remember, Maryland is a slave state. And the governor of Maryland says, sure, why not? Go for it. So, there's the first bridge, that's the Bush River Bridge. They're going to burn it, of course. They are going to burn, the Gunpowder Bridge. There's the gunpowder on fire. Canton Bridge, that's out of order. That's the first one he destroyed. So again, back here, there's the station. There's the bridge right there going over the creek. And of course, while that's going on, because now the bridges are burned out, the United States government pulls a fast one. They send troops to Havre de Grace. They grab the Maryland before the train can arrive because they're so busy burning the bridges. A southbound United States train filled with troops, they grabbed the Maryland. And in the first time that I can find in the Civil War that the U.S. government grabs private property for military use, Benjamin Butler, the beast of New Orleans later in the war, Ben Butler steals the Maryland, puts his men on the Maryland and takes them down to Annapolis, to the U.S. Navy Yard, lands his men, and they capture the United States Navy Yard and try to hold it and secure it for the federal government. And then, knowing that the problem is Baltimore, he hot rushes most of his men back up to Baltimore without orders from Washington on his own, and then Butler takes over Federal Hill and puts Baltimore under martial law. And it's Ben Butler who, in effect, makes Maryland howl because Butler and his men started enforcing Lincoln's, suspension of habeas corpus, all the other stuff that Lincoln pulls. And Maryland, as you know, never does secede.
Good lawyer.
What's that?
Butler's a good lawyer,
Yeah, exactly.
right? He's the one who.
Ex parte Merriman.
There were a lot of support in Maryland to not secede though.
Oh, pretty in the West.
They were really
Because
just.
Western
behind
Maryland
Baltimore.
was a bunch of hillbillies. then
And
now.
Talbot County, Talbot County was
County.
like 8-1.
Right. But if you go on the Eastern Shore, places like that, Prince Charles, etc. So they're occupying Maryland. While this is going on, in downtown Philadelphia, at the PWB's shops, they build this thing. This is the only known sketch I've ever seen, and my good friend Daniel Toomey actually found a photograph of it.
Wow.
The one and only, that's actually on the Bush River Bridge. So that is the
Wow, I've never
Philadelphia
seen that
Fort on Wheels, as the press calls it. Anybody ever seen that picture before?
No.
Yeah, Dan Toomey is in terrible health, unfortunately. There was a
Is he still alive though?
He's still alive.
He's still alive?
Yeah, he curated
Yeah.
the work comes to Baltimore.
Yeah, exactly.
Well.
Oh, yeah. Dan's health has been really bad for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
He almost died. He did not die. But
He
he's
had
still a
throat-
really,
throat cancer.
yeah, he's still really, yeah, he's got throat cancer,
He
really
he
bad.
got really.
So those are the two are the same?
Yeah, so this is the sketch done by a news reporter, and that's the photograph. Supposedly the same car, just, kind of flipped around, of course.
Similar.
Oh, similar, yeah. But yeah, that's the only known photograph. And Dan found that, I wanna say, he found it at an antique shop in Baltimore. He'd never seen it before, and it's like, holy cow, look at this. That's the Philadelphia, Fort on Wheels. And so Dan graciously gave me permission to use that in the book, and I think we were the first people to ever use this.
I've never seen it.
So while that's
You
going
seen it?
on, let's go back to Philadelphia. There's the Broad Street Station, South and Western Station as they called it, because it was in the southwestern part of Baltimore. It becomes a huge rallying point for Union troops. Everybody going to Washington that eventually is going to become the Army of the Potomac starts in Harrisburg or Philadelphia.
Go back a second. How many troops did Butler have with him?
About four. Yeah, by the time he finished occupying Baltimore, he had about 1,000.
1,000.
Yeah, or so. When he first takes to Maryland, he's only got a couple hundred, honestly, for the beginning. So, while this is going on, at Perryville, the United States Army grabs a secessionist named Stump's Farm, and now it's a park. You've ever been to this park? That is the United States Army's mule school. So, the Army will bring, I think it's something like 11,000, yeah, there it is, 11,000 mules.
Wow.
Are brought to Perryville, and they're trained, they fire blanks near them so they get used to the sound of cannons, etc.
Who was the owner, you said?
Stump,
Oh, okay.
his name was Stump. He
Is
was
this
he was a secessionist, and the U.S. government used the, you're expat, you've left your property, you're a secessionist, we're taking it over in the name of the U.S. government, and to really insult the guys, they stable mules sometimes in his house.
Is that where the community park is?
Yeah, that's a community
I
park.
was just there yesterday.
Yeah. So that's a community park. So did you see that?
I saw the back
It's right by the
sign.
park.
I
It's
didn't
right-
read it.
Yeah, it's right by the parking
I
lot.
saw that sign. I
Yeah,
didn't
the
read it.
parking lot's right back
I
here.
didn't know it was a support
It's
sign.
a new park, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is this Maryland?
Yeah, it's Perryville,
It's right
Maryland.
across the river from Harbor of the Grace.
It's
Yeah, it's
about,
Perryville,
what,
Maryland.
25 minutes from here maybe?
Yeah, 25 minutes, yeah, maybe or so.
I was there yesterday.
Yeah. So isn't that cool? Yeah.
It's a nice
The United States Mule School. So again, 11,000 mules. So basically, all the mules that the Army of the Potomac are going to use for much of the early part of the war are trained in Maryland. And of course, the PWB, if you go back through their records, mules are a huge part of their cargo that they're shipping down from Philadelphia, as well as soldiers. They have mule trains, they have soldier trains, and they have ammunition trains, among other things, coming down. So this is, again, right outside the train station. Train station's
Wow.
back there. Look, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore train car. And there is the
Nice
Union
painting.
Volunteer Refreshment Saloon. And here are all the soldiers getting on board the train or leaving the train, whatever. You know, rest stop. Ever seen this one before? It's a cool
No.
picture. PWB right there. No. This is Curry and Ives print from Library of Congress. So I was looking through it, and I'm like, holy Hannah, there's the PWB.
I don't remember seeing that before.
Yeah, it's there. Isn't it great? Yeah.
What's the title of it?
No.
It's
Not like,
Union Volunteer
not like
Refreshment
resumes.
Saloon. You can look that up
Okay.
and look for the pictures there. All right, so while that's going on, as you guys know, the troops here in Delaware are all coming in Newcastle, etc. They're being assembled in Newark and Wilmington, in Newcastle, etc. And they are taking the PWB from the train station in Wilmington. They are also heading south, of course, down to Havre de Grace. So while that's going on, the Philadelphia going to Baltimore now starts expanding. They start double tracking, etc. And building new locomotives. There's another one that's skinny. So again, probably a coal burner, as you were saying earlier, versus what, a wood burner maybe?
Probably.
Yeah. So.
Yes.
So you've got the
Oh.
schedules, the
Good.
print, and the government's, they're making a fair amount of money off the government needs.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah,
just one random question. When you go back,
yeah,
that illustration right there,
right.
do you have an origin for where that comes from? Because I know it's modern century.
Yeah, I got it in my notes where I got this. I had permission from the artist, I can't remember his name.
Okay.
Well, that's a, I believe, one of engravings. It's not.
Well, the
colorized.
original engravings from Baltimore, Battles and Leaders. The guy who colorized it, actually his name's Ivor Jancy, now I think about it, from Chicago. He colorized it.
Okay, because there's a
But
Oh, the guy from the Zog magazine?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's Ivor did that.
I haven't heard from him in a while.
Yeah, he's still there, it's live and kicking. So he and I still talk all the time.
I was wondering if it was an original engraving done. Of course, not.
The original sketch is for Battles and Leaders.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Because there was a painting that was included in, I think, the '94 issue of Civil War Times.
Based on that. Yeah.
Based on that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's based on that.
I was wondering which came first.
Right, yeah, Battles and Leaders, the original sketch came first, and then Ivor, like I said, colorized it, et cetera.
Gotcha.
So the railroad starts connecting then to put another spur into Baltimore, or I mean Philadelphia, to get rid of these backlogs that are in Philadelphia, to get rid of this bridge. They want to go, as you can see it going down here, they can eliminate a lot of that. And they go across the Grays Ferry Bridge. So this will give them a second access point versus the one bottleneck they've got, which is right here, the original line. So they're expanding fairly dramatically as the war progresses. And look at this. There's one of the original Civil War United States government. This is the National Archives. So it says June 8th, 1864, Captain S.J. Richmond, Quartermaster, United States Army. Look, he's got all this supplies being sent from Philadelphia to Washington on the PWB. So there are still some government records in Washington. I found this one, 4 or 5 others. I haven't found a lot, but I found a few.
By the way, that picture of the guy sitting on the,
Yeah.
that's supposedly at Aquia Landing.
Yeah, that's a pile again.
That's the, if you look, every reenactor may use the Baltimore Army Union Bakery, it's the only picture of one.
I know.
But since there's a boat in Cincinnati that has a different Army bread box.
Really?
Yeah, in their
Interesting.
museum.
Interesting.
I don't know if it's right or not, but it's.
Well, my kid goes, or grandkid goes to college in Ohio. Next time I see him, I'll zip over and take a
Go to
look.
that, that's a great diorama, it's a full-scale diorama
Okay. I gotta look.
in the basement of the train station.
Oh, wow.
Definitely worth a visit.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, one of the key parts as the war progresses, of course, is protecting the Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore Railroad because of Isaac Trimble's raid in April of 1861. 10th New York Cavalry is one among the first troops that are sent down. They're called the Railroad Brigade. This guy is Dixon Miles. Anybody know why he's famous in the Civil War?
Well, let's see, it was the son of
The day he dies. What did he do in the morning of what day he dies? Anybody know?
Ah, yes.
Dixon Miles is hit in the head by a shell fragment. An hour after he does what? Surrenders Harper's Ferry to Stonewall Jackson.
Right, right.
Same guy, Dixon Miles. There he is. So Dixon Miles has got less than 8 months to live when that sketch is done. Surrenders Harper's, yeah, imagine the ignominy. He surrenders Harper's Ferry, and as the last Confederate shot at Harper's Ferry
Yeah.
explodes over town, takes his head off. It's most of his head. Whoops. Now, the other thing PWB invents is the Harris Hospital car. You guys ever seen these sketches before?
Yep.
Yeah, so they're one of the first railroads, they use India, these are India rubber straps,
Right.
and they put, straight off the battlefield, they bring you on your stretcher, instead of putting you on a bed or cot or laying you on the floor, they actually put you in these, you know, bunk beds, if you will, but you're still in your original stretcher, and the idea was these rubber bands give you some cushioning, if you will,
Yep.
as the thing. Now, these things, the PWB uses this for a little bit. You know, who really uses this are the railroads out west.
Yeah, sure.
The U.S. Army, yeah, Sherman, they use these a ton in Tennessee and
What are
Georgia.
those round things? On the
On
floor?
the floor, spittoons,
Are they spittoons?
I think. I've looked at that picture before, and that's my assumption, is they're probably spittoons for the guys to do that. Or maybe if they have to throw up, maybe they're there for a,
Mm-hmm.
or for
Bedpan.
or bedpans, yeah, maybe all three.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one pan.
Kind of a
Catch all.
One pen solves all problems.
Exactly.
Whatever it is, it's coming out, not going in.
Yeah, so again, there's a cross section of a typical Harris car. The original Harris cars are built in Philadelphia, PW&B, as well as the Philadelphia and Reading and the Philadelphia Columbia Railroad, all three kind of collaborate to start building these things.
With the rubber bands.
With rubber bands, yeah. So May 1863, Fort Delaware, as we all know, Philadelphia went to Baltimore, carries 3,000 Confederate prisoners after Chancellorsville. So this is the, at the time, the largest transfer of Confederate troops on the Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore Railroad. They are shipped, I think it's something like 25 or so separate shipments contain, not every train is a prisoner train. Sometimes it's three cargo boxcars and then a couple passenger cars of rebels. And sometimes it's strictly passenger cars full of rebels.
So do you know, where do they, from Chancellorsville, which way did they go, do you know?
From Chancellorsville, that typically were either taken by boat from Fredericksburg, by boat up and around out into the ocean back to Washington. You know, you don't want to march a lot of those guys because John Singer and Mosby and other folks are running around out there. So, but as I understand it, it's mostly boat traffic.
They show a boat right there, but that's the ferry to the island, right?
Yeah, that's the island ferry, of course, yeah.
We're
You
going
guys
there
are doing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Supposedly,
Yeah, so you guys will do that
as soon as the
tomorrow.
weather hangs up.
Anybody never been to Fort Delaware? It's really cool. Make sure you take the back tour. The back tour takes you into parts of Fort Delaware that the public doesn't see with the normal tour. So if you can tell your guy you want to see the bats, they'll take you into the bowels of Fort Delaware. It's really cool. All right, so Gettysburg Campaign. Let's going to talk about this for a minute. This is John Fulton Reynolds. John Fulton Reynolds is killed at Gettysburg, as we all know. Well, what people may not know is how his body goes back to his family in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So John Fulton Reynolds is dragged to the George house in Gettysburg, near
Gettysburg Eddies.
yeah, Gettysburg, yeah, that area, yeah. So they go to the George house. He is put in a coffin, but the coffin is not big enough for him. They have to kick the end of it out. His boots are sticking out the end. They're going to put him in a wagon, take him 25 miles south from Gettysburg into Maryland to Union Bridge, Maryland. And Union Bridge, a Western Maryland, I got that in my Western Maryland book, a Western Maryland carpenter builds a coffin the right size. They put Reynolds' body in this coffin, discard the cheap teenager's coffin, and they pack it full of ice. They put it on a Western Maryland train, take Reynolds' body downtown to Relay House, down to Calvert Street Station, where the Baltimore Downtown Athletic Club is today. That's the old freight station of the Northern Central Railway. And the adjacent Baltimore Sun printing office was where the station was. So now he goes into Baltimore. He's going to be embalmed in Baltimore. He's taken out of the wooden coffin. He's put in a lead-lined coffin from a real funeral home. And then he's put on the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore. And so Reynolds comes north, he gets on the Maryland, which is back in service, of course, by then, and he crosses the hour-long crossing over to Perryville. They bring his body into Philadelphia, put it on a train for the Philadelphia and Columbia Railroad division of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and that takes him to Lancaster. So this roundabout, killed in Gettysburg, drops all the way down to Baltimore, to Philadelphia, and back over to Lancaster. It's got to be the most roundabout way I can imagine of getting somebody from Gettysburg. You're just not going down Route 30 to Philadelphia or to Lancaster. Can't do that.
Why the Corleone down there?
What's that?
Why the ship?
Oh, Coeur d'Alene. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. The U.S. government sends the Coeur d'Alene and one other ship to guard the Maryland.
Oh, okay.
So during the Gettysburg campaign, there's again concerns that the rebels are going to try to sever this river. Because remember, this is the bottom, you know, if you can sink this, there's no way across and having to grace anymore. And this is because it's one of the huge Union supply lines. They're always throughout the war worried about the Maryland. And so the Coeur d'Alene will spend most of the summer of 1863 right beside the Maryland. So anytime the Maryland moves, you got a gunship, a very powerful gunship, right beside it. And typically, you would have a couple smaller ships on the other side. But you always have this big boy, with about, I think it's got 18 guns, if I remember. And Coeur d'Alene, it's a big long boat. So, and there, of course, is some of the communications about Reynolds' body on the Philadelphia. This is in Philadelphia, I think you can see it in Philadelphia. So, let's go back to the bridge. Throughout the war, this guy, I can't read, Parker, his idea is, how do we actually put a bridge and have it be grace? There, of course, is a steamboat, etc. So they've always wanted to put a bridge. They've never been able to do it. They've actually sent down deep-sea bell divers who have died on the bottom of the bay because the water, I mean, the land is so silty. It's very muck. Not a lot of solid down there to actually put the piers of any kind of bridge. So what they ended up doing, and this, a friend of mine, my former boss, was the captain of the U.S. Rangers, West Point educated, and he tipped me off to this. He's like, in West Point engineering classes, they still teach this. This is how they actually, so there's the original river, how soft it was, and so they would actually then, start damming it up, drive all these piles, use a circular saw underwater to cut the piles off, and then they would take what they call the grillage, they would actually sink it down to the pilings, and then eventually they would build a cofferdam around that, and then put the piers on it, and then there you go. So there's Havre Grace Perryville Bridge, Susquehanna River diagram, method of construction, pile foundation, blah, blah, blah.
What year was that?
1864. Wow. So in the middle of the Civil War, the U.S. figured out how to finally bridge there. Because again, they're so concerned about the vulnerability of that supply line and the fact that you need a bridge. And so they end up starting to build that. So while we're doing that, I want to talk about Lincoln for a minute. Lincoln makes at least 2 trips on the PWB during the war after his trip in disguise in April 1861. One of his trips, he goes up to Aubrey, New York, where he meets with Winfield Scott. And one of the things that he talks about with Winfield Scott is 1862, October 1862. What is Lincoln frustrated with in October 1862?
McClellan.
George Brendan McClellan. He goes up to Auburn, New York, and meets, or not Auburn, West Point, New York, and meets with Winfield Scott, who's in retirement by that point in time. But he was Lincoln's first general-in-chief, so Lincoln still likes the guy. And of course, Scott concocted the Anaconda Plan, so-called by the press. So Lincoln you still got Lincoln's ear. So he goes up to talk to him about, what do I do with McClellan? And so that's his first trip that I can find on the PWB that I know Lincoln went on. His next trip is in July of 1864. He goes to Philadelphia on the PWB and goes to the Sanitary Fair, the Ladies' Sanitary Fair in downtown Philadelphia. Again, Lincoln twice more is on the Maryland, which I'm sure now he's finally able to stand on the deck and look at the pretty scenery as it crosses the Susquehanna, not flying by at 75 miles an hour like I did on the I-95 bridge. one quick glance to the south and pray you don't hit anybody. So while that's going on, that same July, while Lincoln's in Philadelphia, here comes Harry Gilmore and Bradley Johnson, dispatched by Jubal Early. Their job is to go to Point Lookout and free the Confederate prisoners of war that are being held at Point Lookout, Maryland. It's a very audacious raid. They think they're going to take these 10,000 prisoners of war. I don't know where they think they're going to find guns for them, but they're going to try to free them from Point Lookout. So Johnson and Gilmore's job is to try to figure out how to take Point Lookout. They're never going to go there, but what they do is start wrecking the PWB. So this railroad's still back in play. So here is Magnolia Station. There's a picture of the raid on Magnolia Station. There's also a second raid as well. And while they're there on the train, they're going to burn they actually burned 2 PWB trains. And they have this guy in civilian clothes. His name is William Beale Franklin. He's from York, Pennsylvania. This is, again, one of my guys. So he's buried in York. He is, of course, the commander of the Union 6th Corps at Fredericksburg in the Grand Right wing of the Burnside's army at Fredericksburg. Commands half the Army of the Potomac, but most people don't remember this guy. We do in York because he's on my tour of the Prospect Hill Cemetery. But he's in civilian clothes because, he's been warned, maybe you don't want to be in a major general's uniform riding the PWB. But when Bradley Johnson and Harry Gilmore, particularly Harry Gilmore's boys, grabbed the train, somebody says, that guy right there, yeah, right there. He's a major general of the United States Army. Grab him. And so somebody on the train betrays William Beale Franklin. He is captured at that point in time. He is put on a carriage, and he is taken under guard Confederate soldiers with General Franklin in his civilian clothes. But everyone's really tired. And these rebels have been riding. They had a raid on New Windsor. They had a raid at Westminster, Maryland, on the Western Maryland Railroad on their way to PWB, and the boys are tired. And they all fall asleep. William Beale Franklin doesn't fall asleep. He waits till the last guard is zonked, and he just calmly gets up and walks into the woods, and starting to get hungry before dawn. He's been on the road for almost 6 hours in the woods. Gutsily, Maryland's a 50-50 shot, right? To your point on, whether people believe or not in the U.S. government. He knocks on a farmhouse door, praying, 50-50 shot, and the people open the door. He's like, I'm Major General William Beale Franklin, United States Army. I need food. They're Union sympathizers. They bring them in. They send their kid down the road to a waiting Union patrol because they're all out looking for Franklin to find out, can we recapture the guy? And William Beale Franklin is brought to where? The Barnum Hotel, the same hotel in downtown Baltimore that supposedly the Cypriot barber was going to kill Lincoln. He goes, William Beale Franklin goes there. In his memoirs, you know what he says? One of the first things he did. He went to the
barbershop, yeah.
Shoot the barber?
No, he didn't shoot him. He went to the barber.
Right.
He went to the barber and got a shave. So, for all we know, York, Pennsylvania's highest-ranking military general until Jacob Devers in World War II is actually shaved by the alleged potential
Conspirator,
assassin of Lincoln. So, final thing I want to chat about, this guy, John Wilkes Booth. Did you know? As I mentioned, John Wilkes Booth's 5th and 6th grade education is in York, Pennsylvania. The old school that he attends is gone, it's a private academy. But he befriends an older man there by the name of Ned Spangler. Spangler is an old York family. Ned Spangler's 4th great grandfather founded York, Balthazar Spangler founded York, Pennsylvania, one of the founders, and plotted it. So Ned Spangler, a friend from York, and of course helps John Wilkes Booth during the assassination. He is thrown in with conspirators. He is later found guilty. He's sentenced to Fort Jefferson and dried tortugas. But while this is going on, I decided I'm going to start tracking John Wilkes Booth. And the last time I can find John Wilkes Booth that I can prove he was on the Philadelphia Wilmington Baltimore, look at that date, March 25th, 1865. April 14th, what does he do? He shoots Abraham Lincoln. This is the last train ride John Wilkes Booth's ever on. He's on the PWB.
Interesting.
Why is he going to Philadelphia on the PWB? Asa Booth Clark, his sister. She, like, if you know the Booth family, they're from Bel Air, right? Every single member of the family is pro-union, except for John Wilkes. His brothers, Junius Booth, it's his father,
Yeah.
Junius Senior,
Yeah.
they're adamantly pro-union,
Right.
pro-government, very strong unionists. As is Asa Booth. Her husband is a United States military officer. John Wilkes Booth shows up at his sister's house after getting off the train station in Baltimore, hires a hack, goes to his sister's house, and according to her sworn, if you ever read the testimonies of the conspirators' trials for the Lincoln assassination, she is one of the people who files the deposition. And she says, my brother came to my house. He knocked on the door. I didn't answer. He knocked again. I pretended I wasn't home. He left me a note. Inquisitor from the commission, what was on the note? I don't know. I burned it up. I never read it. I never
So
opened
she
it.
knew it was him knocking.
Oh, she knew it was her brother. She admitted her brother was the door. We don't know what was in the letter. Was it farewell, sister, I'm gonna kill the president? Was it, hey, you know, you're my sis, I love you,
Yeah.
whatever? Is it a farewell message to her? Who knows? There has been speculation over the years that Asa Booth Clark knew more about the plot than she ever let on. That maybe John Wilkes Booth was there just to, okay. calm
Get
me
settled,
down,
yeah.
tell me I'm doing the right thing, you know. It's his little sister, you know.
Yeah.
And she's the least pro-union of the rest of the family. So, with that, the PWB prospers. There's the bridge. It actually opens right after the Civil War. It opens in July of 1865. And there it is. After those elaborate pilings that they put in, there's the very first railroad bridge to ever cross the Susquehanna River. And this is Havre de Grace. That's Perryville over there.
Industrious people, those
Yep.
Union guys.
What the hell
Yeah,
were they
so
doing?
Abraham Lincoln-
Same thing with the Potomac.
Were they
Abraham
pushing
Lincoln
block?
kind of takes one final
Were they pushing
trip
block in that
associated
in
with the
that
PWB.
shot?
Lincoln, of course, is
Block.
shot on the
Looks like
14th
they were
by John
pushing
Wilkes
block.
Booth. On the 15th, he dies.
That last photo.
On the 21st, his funeral
I've seen
train
it.
leaves Washington. But the PWB has
Oh, if the
part
guy's
of
at
the
the
funeral
side of the
train.
hill,
So-
pushing block into it.
Cheap
Is that what you're
commercial
asking?
funeral train book.
Maybe, I don't know.
So, Lincoln's funeral train, 3 cars go all the way from Washington to Springfield, Illinois. A baggage car provided by the B&O. The United States, the Lincoln funeral car, which was built by the U.S. government, U.S. Military Railroad in Alexandria, Virginia. This was built over the winter of 1864-65. Lincoln wrote it one time. Sometimes you'll read he never wrote it. He wrote it one time briefly. Said it looked pretty good. And over Easter weekend, they got to strip it all out and put all, redecorate it. There's 3 rooms in there. Lincoln's in there, dead body. Soldiers sit there in the honor guard, and his little son, William Wallace Lincoln's body's dug up in Washington and sent home with Dad to be buried in Springfield. So, but look back here. That is Samuel Morse Felton's private car. The president of the PWB Railroad sends what he calls the director's car, but it's his. He uses it all the time. He donates, the B&O donates the baggage car, not to be outdone by John W. Garrett of the B&O. Samuel Morse Felton, who doesn't like John W. Garrett, provides one-upsmanship. Well, you can do a baggage car. I'll give my private car, and that's where Mrs. Lincoln was supposed to ride. She doesn't. She ends up not going on the funeral train. She comes 2 weeks later on a private train with Robert Lincoln, because she doesn't. It's a whole other ballgame. She doesn't want anything to do with the funeral train.
She's
doesn't want
whacked,
Lincoln-
yeah.
She doesn't want Lincoln to be displayed publicly. She's really ticked about all this.
Yep.
Yeah, there's the PWB. That's the. So a lot of the funeral train pictures you see will see the PWB's car, and of course there's the government car. So I want to thank you guys for your time. Look, I'm starting your life. But I want to thank you guys.
Wow, Scott.
So, yeah, I started out my project years ago I live in York, I wanted to do a book on the Northern Central Railway. it was really popular. I sold a bunch of them. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. Why don't I do the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore? Okay, that works. I sold a bunch of those too. So then I did the Cumberland Valley Railroad. So at that point, I did every railroad. There were only 3 that ran between Pennsylvania and Maryland during the war. And I'm like, well, maybe I should branch out. So I did the Western Maryland Railroad, and then decided to do after the war. I did the Baltimore and Potomac. I did the New Park and Pine Grove Railroad, the Gettysburg, York, and Wrightsville Railroad. And my next book is the Hanover Branch Railroad. So in the middle of all that, I decided I'm going to do one of the Lincoln Funeral Train because it ran between Maryland and Pennsylvania. So
Wait, the Northern Central book you did you mention that one?
no, I didn't mention that one yet.
That's a good book. I like
Yeah.
So cheap commercial again.
Very good.
that. That's a good one.
Yeah, that was the first of my railroad books. Yeah. So, but the backstory in that is my grandfather was a bridge builder and later the bridge foreman for the New York Central Railway in Ohio. So he and his crew built all the bridges between 1920 and 1960 on the New York Central before they merged with Pennsylvania to form the Penn Central. And then my aunt and uncle were dispatchers for Conrail most of their lives at Marion, Ohio. So I got railroad blood, and my grandfather and my uncle ran a sawmill, and their number 1 product was railroad ties. So I got kind of railroading in my blood. So that's how I got involved. Yes.
But, you know, in that great presentation you gave to us a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I
That was
asked you.
one of the railroads in the Gettysburg campaign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked you if you researched any of the southern railroads and whatnot.
Yeah.
But tonight you alluded to some southern information that you
Yeah.
might be able to share.
So what I did, I wrote a book on called Unceasing Fury, Texas at Chickamauga. And in that book, I discuss the transport of Longstreet's First Corps, minus Pickett's division, from Richmond to Atlanta. I have almost a whole chapter on that. And the problem with it, because the Texas Brigade is part of that, the problem with that is with the East Tennessee Railroad out of condition, because Burnside has taken Knoxville, that railroad has the same gauge and connects with Richmond to Atlanta through Chattanooga. Can't do that now. So the Confederates had to send Longstreet's Corps south down the eastern seaboard through North and South Carolina, cutting across through Augusta and Macon, Georgia to Atlanta, and then back up towards Chattanooga on the Western and Atlantic Railroad. Problem is that most of those railroads don't have the same gauge. So as the Confederates were coming down, for example, they did in North Carolina, they're going to stop. Everybody gets off the train, all the ammunition's unloaded, all the bags are unloaded. They have to walk over to the other train station, reload all the train cars, and then keep going. When they hit the South Carolina border, they got to do it all over again because, again, the gauges don't match. Did you guys know Chickamauga is probably the Confederacy's single biggest victory of the war?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you know 1 full third of Longstreet's infantry never gets to Chickamauga because of the railroads?
Yep.
Not a single one of Longstreet's
Artillery.
84 cannons,
Right.
not one,
Right.
goes to Chickamauga. If you assume the railroad gauges in the South match, Chickamauga might have been the destruction of the Army of the Cumberland entirely.
Yeah.
You put 84 more guns and 8,000 more
Yeah.
Confederate soldiers
Yeah.
on the field when the battle begins, there is no rock at Chickamauga. I mean, I don't care how good George Thomas is, he didn't stop that stuff. But I'll contend that the South lost the Civil War because their railroad gauges didn't match. There's a lot of cases that I can document where Confederates they lose time trying to reinforce, trying to ship food, trying to do all kinds of stuff because the gauges don't agree.
If you summarize this,
They figured out railroads.
Yeah.
Most of the gauges down that way were 5-foot gauge.
Yeah.
So North Carolina and Virginia, that were 2-foot.
Right, exactly.
But the real problem was the tracks didn't connect in any of the towns.
Yeah, exactly.
Same problem the Northern
Exactly.
had.
Right.
Exactly.
so have you summarized this information in any of your books?
Unceasing Fury.
It's
Texas
what?
and Chickamauga. Unceasing
Unceasing
Fury,
Fury.
Texas and Chickamauga.
There's 2 books in there.
So again, I want to thank you guys for your time, I really appreciate it. Sorry, I ran over.
Great job, Scott.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Wait for another couple hours.
We got another speaker coming, mind you. So-
We do?
I thought you had another, or is that tomorrow? you got-
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
Ah, there we go.
Wait, take
You
it
want to talk
out there.
about tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you've got your thing.
I'll
You
send
have to
you
do
the
that.
two-track.
Yeah, please do. You have my email, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll send you a link, because it's a good document.
I wanna see the-
Just
what's
on
the price
yeah,
on it?
just make a scene, you can do it.
No, I do not.
One T-track module.
How am I have to
one
pick that
T-track
up?
module.